You're listening to the Night Demon Network. Go to nightdemon.net/subscriber to unlock more exclusive content.
Hello and welcome to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. I'm your host Nesbit, and today we continue our dive into the history of Night Demon. This is Roots of the Demon, Part 3. So last week we talked about Jarvis's first band, Black Opal, and Armand's first real band, The Whereabouts. And we talked about the scene at the time when those two bands were coming up. In this episode, we're going to pick it up right from there with childhood friends Armand and Jarvis forging on in the Ventura, California music scene. So last episode, we heard about the tragic ending of Black Opal. Here's Jarvis Leatherby.
So after Black Opal was officially put into the ground, I continued at the Ventura Theater promoting as many concerts as I could. And it was at that time that summer, some very good friends of mine who I went to high school with, a band called No Motiv, they had always done pretty well. They were kind of the biggest band in town when we were in high school, and they had gotten signed to a new independent record company called Vagrant Records that was owned by the manager of the band Face to Face.
So No Motive would eventually become a big part of Jarvis's life, but as one of the most successful bands from that scene at the time, they're also influential to Armand and his band The Whereabouts.
I'm sorry when I came. I'm sorry for the way I couldn't look you in the eyes through the times we realized that it's in my eyes. I'm sorry when I know nothing more. I'm sorry when I can. I turn to let them through. There's nothing new.
Here's Armand John Anthony.
You know, there was another local band called No Motive, and they were a little more of our style, The Whereabouts. Like we looked up to them a lot. They kind of invented this style, this sound they would call it sadcore. It was like kind of somber, like kind of songs and somber lyrics, but with, a heavier, faster feel. They had some pretty like fast punk songs, but as they went on, they kind of slowed down, and I guess you could call it like the beginnings of kind of emo, I guess, kind of shit, indie, whatever. But we gelled a lot, we understood each other, and our bands played a lot together as well. Those guys had got a record deal with a label called Vagrant Records. And it was like, this was the big thing, man. It was like, fuck, these guys are doing it,
They made a record called And the Sadness Prevails, and they were going out on tour, and they were touring with bands like like that. And so they were actually going on tour with Face to Face that August of 99. And, you know, I had been promoting shows for a couple years by that point and really knew the ins and outs of things and hung around a lot of touring bands. And their drummer, Pat, had basically asked if I wanted to go on the road with them and tour manage the band. And I thought, well, this is it. This is my chance. This is my chance to finally get out of here and do something with my life, you know, with rock and roll. You know, I was bringing a lot of people, I was bringing a lot of bands over. You know, I was bringing bands over. I had a college fund basically that my grandparents had started for me when I was born, and instead of going to college, I dropped out of school and took the money and was bringing bands over from Europe and bands that had never been to the U.S. and really helping out and doing that stuff. I guess kind of investing in it, but I really was just investing in myself because I never made any money and I lost quite a bit. But what I gained in experience and in life experience is priceless. So it was an investment well worth it. So yeah, that summer they were going on tour with Face to Face. I was the tour manager. They had a booking agent by the name of Dan at the company called Royal Flush at the time. And he was not holding up his end of the bargain. I mean, there was a thing where, you know, they had done a previous tour and had said that like nobody had their catering riders or anything like that. And so what I did was I basically copied some contracts of like the bigger bands that I was booking and the catering writers and kind of customized my own thing. And I called it Black Opal Management. And I just sent it to all the promoters on the tour that we were opening up for, on the face-to-face tour. I sent it to all the promoters. At that time, it was fax machines. So I faxed those over. And you know what? Like half the time we would get what was on there, what I had on there. And sometimes I put crazy things on there like batteries or condoms or socks or whatever. And like they would put them on there. So, you know, if you don't ask, you don't get, right? So that was my first taste of going out on the road. And I remember the first night of that tour, we left at night. The first show was in San Francisco. So it's about about 7 or 8 hours if you're a van pulling a trailer from Ventura to San Francisco. So we left late the night before, and I said, hey, I'll take the first drive, right? And I just drove through the night and then got there at 8 a.m. or something, and I just passed out so hard. I remember, and then we had the show that night, so I wasn't even playing in the band, but I remember the longest day of my life, and I kept saying it to myself, this is the longest day of my life. Is this what I want to do with my life? And I started to really have second thoughts about it. But as the tour rolled on and we went across the country, you know, I just really fell in love with the lifestyle. And it was very hard, especially in those days. I mean, talk about having no money to do anything. It was very hard. I mean, hotels, forget about it, you know. So I ended up doing another tour with the band later in the year. And that was very cold, and I remember almost getting frostbite in Canada, just like sleeping in the car. I mean, really, these are the things that we as, you know, young men and women were putting ourselves through back then. And there was no GPS, there was nothing like that. It was road maps. You'd find yourself going the wrong direction for a couple hours. You got to turn around. It was a lot harder to do things like that back then, but somehow we made it happen.
And so we had the aspirations to do what they were doing, you know. They got on tour. They went and did this shit, you know. We were just getting out of high school and everything, so it was a little harder for us to do it. But anyway, we were gearing up to do all that stuff, and then our singer, you know, had a kid with this chick, and they got married, and he had to leave town, you know, and go kind of like work and do his thing and take care of his family thing that he had just started. So that band kind of fell apart because of that around 2000, 2001. So at that time, we had a rehearsal space, which is down the street from the captain's quarters here, and has a very big part in how I ended up over here and doing what I do with recording and all that. So we shared a rehearsal room with No Motiv, and they had kind of gotten to a point where they had to just put their second album out, and this other project kind of started with their drummer Pat Pedraza.
Hey, what's up? My name is Pat Pedraza. I play drums in the band From Satellite. Played drums, went on tour with the band for a while. After I was in my band, I played in a band called No Motiv before that.
He wanted to go a little more mainstream with the sound and, with the whole vibe of the band and with his career. So those guys didn't really want to go that route. So they ended up parting ways. And he started a new band with some guys called From Satellite.
My name's Ryan, a.k.a. Polar Bear. I am the other guitarist from Satellite. But I was working with our drummer, Pat, and I had some song ideas that I played for him, and he really liked them and wanted to record them and see what could happen with it. And Pat knew Armand, and we went over there to his studio and started recording some tracks. I think Armand really liked them and picked up the bass and started playing the bass lines, and that's how it all kind of started.
I was between projects. My band had fell apart and I didn't have anything really going on, so I said, well, fuck, I'll play bass. They had a female singer at the time, and there was some kind of interest with labels and stuff. They had gotten a manager who was really connected in LA and all that, and they just, there was a lot of hype behind it. So they were like, hey, man, I know you're a guitar player, but I looked at it as all right, well, fuck it, I'll play bass, and this thing has some potential to go somewhere. Well, let me jump in. Maybe this will be my meal ticket, one of those things. Because I still wanted to do the thing, play music. And if I could get in a band that, kind of helped me get to that point, then fucking so be it. Let's do it, So that turned into a whirlwind of record labels and showcasing for record labels and really getting a taste of the industry before it completely collapsed. I mean, I got a taste of that shit, major label stuff, major label money, major label dinners, the wine and dine, the fucking, yeah, you guys are like the next Rolling Stones kind of bullshit, and then they don't do anything with you, Heard all that stuff.
The initial band that we started was called Forum. We had a singer named Amy Allen, and also Max on guitar was from Pat's other band, No Motiv, and Armand was playing bass. And we played a few shows, got some record label interest, and the label turned out to really only be interested in Amy. So, like many other stories, she took off, signed a deal, and we kind of had to regroup and figure some things out and start something new. And that's kind of when things changed a little bit. Armand then saw his chance to switch to guitar, which is really what he wanted to do, and so he did. And then we found Ian and Justin through some mutual friends who joined the band, Ian singing and Justin on bass.
My name is Ian McDonald, and I was the singer in From Satellite. I was, playing in another band at the time, and I remember Ryan reaching out to me a couple of times to get me to listen to this demo. I guess he had seen a previous band that I was in, and thought I'd be a good fit for this project he was working on, and I kept kind of blowing him off. I was, I didn't know him, and I didn't know any of the other guys in the band, and I was already in a band, and I was trying to commit to that and see it through. And finally, he was just like, "Dude, just listen to the demo." And I was like, okay. So when I listened to it, I knew, I was like, okay, I want to be part of this situation. This is definitely something I wanted to do. It felt very straightforward as far as like, guitar driven, and song driven, and it was different from some of the other stuff that I had been doing, and so I was immediately excited to have a chance to potentially be part of it. There were a couple of lineup changes early on, just some shifting around. They had a singer before me that she plays in some. She's now in some like, I don't know, some ska band, the Shenanigans or something. I don't know. But they had a previous singer, and Max from No Motiv was also in this band, and I think that when she left and some things were changing up, and wasn't Max's thing anymore. So when he left, Armand, who was playing bass at the time, which is just like crazy to me, moved into that guitar position where he's supposed to be, and we needed a bass player. And I because I was new to the group and I didn't really know anybody, we were starting to connect. Everyone was really cool. It was a great situation, but it was hanging out and trying to make music with people that you don't know on a daily basis is a little off-putting. And there was an opportunity to bring on Justin, who is a fantastic bass player and someone who every band I had ever been in, he was kind of like my writing partner, and so I brought him into the situation, and that's how the lineup solidified.
Hey, my name is Justin Huth, but the guys call me Gramps. I was the last member to join the band. I met the guys through Ian, but I'm pretty sure I had met Ryan towards the end of when Ian and I were playing together in another band. But I think ultimately Ian was the one that brought me in. The band was pretty new and mainly recording songs for a demo. There were some lineup changes, and Armand was playing bass at the time, but wanted to switch back to guitar. So it kind of left a bass player spot open. I remember Ian getting a 4-song demo for me to check out, and I remember studying it, so when I went in to play with the guys, I would nail it. And when I got there, we played and it was fun, and I felt like it was a good fit. And I also think that I was a different type of bass player than what they were used to, so it brought a different feel to the songs, like a different dynamic.
Things fell apart with the singer, and it morphed into another project called From Satellite. And I got back on guitar, and there was a 2-guitar band, bass player, same drummer, Pat, and another singer, this guy named Ian McDonald. But so that band, now that was the band that turned into, again, more of like, it was definitely more of a pop kind of rock thing.
I
We got signed pretty early. I think we had only played a couple of shows before we started showcasing. And the showcasing didn't last too long before we eventually signed with Virgin and Immortal. Thinking back, we definitely needed more time to develop as a band, but it didn't really work out that way. I mean, who doesn't sign a deal that kind of, is something that you've been striving for your whole life as a musician?
We came up really quick. We wrote some songs that we were really proud of. We got them in the hands of the right people, and we generated interest from record labels really fast. I think maybe we played like 5 shows or something and had a record deal on the table. All in all, we probably weren't ready for it, but what do? I mean, when a label is saying they want to sign you and turn you into a rock band, rock stars, whatever you want to say, you kind of have to just go for it.
We got a record deal. Again, the same manager was involved with what this band had turned into. And she had some connections with the label called Immortal Records, who I guess Korn was on really early in their career, that whole time of things. This is the other thing too. You got to remember, this is like the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s. Metal sucked, man. It sucked. It was the fucking new metal thing. I wasn't into it, So for me, the next best thing was, bands like, Stone Temple Pilots, Pearl Jam, like they were playing rock and roll, it was fucking good. They were using cool vintage tones. They had cool style, and, that was what I was into. So this band was kind of that kind of thing, So we ended up hooking up with this label. Long story short, we had a record deal. We got a bunch of money. We went to make a record. It never happened. There was a contract that they had with Virgin Records that was due to expire right before we got our deal. We got the deal, and then it expired that following year. It was like we did the deal in November or something, and it expired in January. But meanwhile, they were trying to get us to get into the studio before that shit ran out, because all the money was coming from Virgin. Well, that didn't really happen. I mean, you got to remember, this is the other thing about that band. That band was not even a fucking band for a year before all this shit happened. We had only played like 4 or 5 shows before getting signed. So it was crazy. Like we didn't know what the fuck we were. We didn't know what kind of band we were. If you listen to that album, the songs are kind of all over the place. It's a real like mix of shit, and it was just like such a whirlwind of like go, let's get this deal, let's get the money, let's fucking get in there. That I think the music kind of suffered because of that, Again, like it wasn't something that I was like, I'd say it was my favorite thing, but, it was definitely an opening to the doors of seeing how things work in the industry and getting a taste of all that. Got signed, didn't make the record at first.
We eventually released, I guess we got released, from that contract, but we had all the songs and all the rest of our signing money, which was kind of the better part of that deal.
Split with the label, split with our manager, and then hooked up with another manager, friend of ours that we had met, who was working for this guy, Pat Magnarella, who managed Green Day and Weezer and like some Goo Goo Dolls, some pretty big bands, And he was interested in working with us. He was starting his own label. It was going to be under Universal Records, and they were all about it, They're like, yeah, we'll make the record you guys wanted to make. I mean, they're like, hey, this is more of an indie label. There's not going to be as much money as we're going to have with this other thing, but we're going to get your record out. So we're like, cool. So we did it. And we made a record. And we made that record with, funny enough, with Matt Hyde, who ended up working on the Empire's Fall. I had him come up to the captain's quarters and record us for that song up here. And the guy that assisted the record at the time was Chris Rakestraw, who is now, kind of a well-known producer in his own right, who does all like the Danzig stuff. I think he's worked with Megadeth and some other bands. He was just kind of starting out at that point. He was assisting that record. Great dude. A lot of good times together with that guy.
I remember making the record, and it was super, super fun. I mean, I remember practicing so much because I wanted the parts to come out perfect, and I didn't want to hold up the process. We worked with Matt Hyde, and that was awesome. He's a great guy. He's a great producer. He has a lot of cool ideas. I think the label was really happy with what we ended up with. And I mean, at least I think it was a good starting point for us to tour on and figure out, the best parts of what we ended up being.
So anyway, that band, that was like, this is it. This is the band, we were going to fucking do it. We had the full on thing behind us. We had the big manager, this guy was going to he was going to work us. We were his baby band. And he was like, he'd had his established bands. He wanted this young new band, and we were the guys. Well, we were the guys until Green Day put out a little album called American Idiot. And everything fucking changed when that happened.
Pat Magnarella, like I said, was managing Green Day, and American Idiot came out right before, I think the year that our record came out. And that was the biggest record of, 3-year span. I don't know. It was huge. And he was just like, he couldn't have been more busy. So, it was kind of a double-edged sword. You had this opportunity because, the people that we were in business with had, all of these connections, and there were all these opportunities, but it also meant that we were, at the bottom of the totem pole, as far as importance to these guys. So, it was a little rough.
It was crazy. Like the album had just come out. This is 2004. And we were ready to go on the road. We started hitting the road, and there was just no support for the label. We didn't know what we were doing. We were used to having everybody do shit for us. Those guys at the label, they were supposed to do things. Like we didn't know what the fuck we were doing. So we were out there on the road flailing around, playing these shows.
There was definitely a little bit of like ego involved. It's kind of hard to be a band that plays 5 shows and gets a record deal and goes out on the road. It's almost like you expect something bigger or better. Your days in a van are limited. Like, you'll be in a bus in no time, and it's only a matter of time before we sell, 500,000 records. And it's just super easy to let that stuff go to your head. I think, when I look back on those times, if there was anything that I kind of regret is not having more of a you're nothing until you are type of mindset.
We kept getting on these tours with these B bands that, like, for example, we toured with Saliva, we toured with Taproot, we toured with Alien Ant Farm. And these bands at that time were kind of like, they were kind of on their way out. They had their hits, in the late 90s or whatever, earlier 2000s. And at this point, the steam kind of ran out, so they were smaller. The shows weren't that great. I don't think we ever really fit with any of those bands either. So it was kind of fucking rough. We were out there on our own. We didn't have a tour manager. We didn't have crew. I mean, yeah, we'd take a buddy with us to do merch and stuff, but we didn't know what the fuck was going on. And it was hard. It was really hard. And we weren't getting the support, we were promised everything, all the shit was supposed to be done for us. It just kind of died out, the album didn't really do anything, nobody really, we'd show up to shows and it was like no promotion. There was no posters on the wall. We'd have our own shows and it was like, we'd call in, what the fuck, where are the posters and all that? And they forgot to send them out, shit like that. It's just like, fuck. For a new band with no support, no radio support, no nothing, it was like the guy that ran our label was super busy with the biggest record of fucking whatever that year, so it kind of cursed us there for a little bit.
Started weighing on us a little bit more. We still had fun on that tour. I think it was with Alien Ant Farm, and those guys were fun. We still had fun on that tour, but I think by the time we got back, we were just ready for a break. I mean, from my perspective, I was just burnt out on the industry. Like it was always about the music to me. I always just really cared about the songwriting, and I feel like the business of it just kind of ruined that for me. I'm not sure what the other guys were feeling, but I know that it had some serious effect on them as well. Just because we kind of just fell apart after that.
That band kind of flailed around for a couple of years and then fell apart.
But all in all, I look back and some super good friendships. We're all still good friends to this day. And I consider all four of those guys my brothers.
We had some fun. It was a good time. I like these guys. I love them. Okay, I don't like them. I love them.
And I'll say one more time when I say it's over, it's over. Can't stand the strength to fight one more dead satellite when I say it's over, it's over. It's over forever.
Anyway, a couple years goes by. I start working at Guitar Center, which is a whole nother stupid thing. But I basically did very well at that job in sales, and I kept getting promoted throughout the company. And it was great. I was around musical gear all the time, but my whole paycheck just went to buy gear. I would get a discount, but I mean, that's basically what it was. I was working for the place and then just recycling the money, just putting it back in to buy stuff because, I loved music and I was playing in other bands at the time. So it was great. But it got to a point where they were talking about possibly moving me out of the area to go run another store. And I thought, well, okay, this is a pretty big crossroads in my life. I'm in my early 20s and I'm like 21, 22, I think. And there was, for a guy who dropped out of high school, it's like, okay, you're making decent money selling guitars and you love music and you love guitars. And now that you could possibly quote unquote climb the corporate ladder and go actually be responsible for stuff and run your own store and travel and all this. And, I don't know, it was kind of enticing at that point. But no sooner than I was asked to do that, No Motiv had a shift in personnel, and they had a band meeting and they invited me for coffee one morning, and they they asked if I would join the band.
My name is Max McDonald. I play guitar in the band No Motiv. Jarvis and I met in high school. We were both playing in bands early on. I was in No Motiv. He was in a band called Black Opal. And we were kind of in these parallel music scenes that tended to cross over every once in a while. You know, we were both playing similar types of shows, lots of different types of bands that sounded completely different. Jarvis was always involved in music in a really multifaceted kind of way. Like I always just play guitar in No Motiv. That was my thing. And I didn't really concern myself with being involved in music in any other avenue, which is kind of the opposite of his approach. He was touching music in every aspect you could imagine, whether it was, being in a band or being in the more promotional side of things, like working at the Ventura Theater, booking shows, promoting shows, producing shows, or even selling gear, working at music stores. Like he was just touching every corner of that industry. So when No Motiv had started touring more heavily, he came out on a tour, one of our earlier tours, to act in a more like a tour managing role. And that kind of integrated him into the sort of like comings and goings of that band, of No Motiv's kind of career. He was sort of like around for the whole arc of all that. So when we came to our third record, our official third record, we had gone through a member change. We had lost our drummer, Pat, and we had written most of this record, Daylight Breaking, just the three of us, Jeremy, Roger, and myself, with Roger playing drums, and we were just writing songs without bass.
I'm Roger Camaro. I'm a producer, audio engineer, and musician. I played bass in No Motiv starting in 1998 up until 2002, at which point I moved on to the drums. And it was at that point, while we were recording our record, Daylight Breaking, that I came to the decision that I wanted to move to the drums permanently. And that's when Max, Jeremy, and I talked and decided that we wanted to reach out to Jarvis to see if he wanted to join our band.
And we had started the recording process. We were all kind of trading off playing bass. And Jeremy and Roger came to me one day, and they had come to a decision that it was just time to integrate a bassist or a fourth member. And there wasn't really much of a discussion about who it was going to be. I mean, they had already figured it out on their own, brought it to me, and it was just like such a easy choice that we all just kind of dove in, and it was Jarvis was the guy.
I always knew Jarvis as a guitar player and a singer, immensely talented one at that. And that was something that I think we all took into consideration when we decided to ask him to be in the band. And on top of that, he was also our tour manager for a few tours before he was ever asked to be in the band. So we already had this bond and connection, and obviously knew what he was like on tour, and it just seemed like the natural thing to do. So one day in, I believe, the year 2002, while we were in the middle of recording our record, Daylight Breaking, we decided to see if he wanted to meet up at our local coffee shop, and sat him down and asked him if he would like to join the band as our bass player.
And I immediately say yes. It wasn't even a second thought. I just completely threw my corporate career away. It was a no-brainer for me. It was one of those things where it's like, look, I'm tired of making everybody else's dreams come true. It's time, what happened to my vision of this for myself? What happened in that time? How did that go away after my best friend died? It just did. And here was my chance to come back. Here was my redemption to kind of be a part of that. So I threw the financial security away for the personal security of following the dream. And that's when I joined No Motiv. I joined No Motiv as the bass player. I was previously a guitar player my whole life. And, that was a spot that was open in the band. And that's why they offered it to me. And that's why I was honored. I think I felt at the time that any spot that was open, they would have offered it to me. And then they knew that I would have figured it out. If I had to learn to be a drummer, I would have done it, So I had the hunger. But learning to play bass was a lot different. I thought, oh man, I'm a guitar player. These are, there's 2 less strings. This will be easy. Wrong. It's all about the right hand when you're playing bass. It's about the steadiness of that. And I was just kind of strumming it like hard like a guitar. But, Roger Camaro, who was the bass player for No Motiv, when the drummer was out of the band, he went to drums, and then I was the bass player. He also engineered Night Demon's Curse of the Damned and Darkness Remains. So, I've been around Roger basically my whole musical career, and he's always been there in some capacity, whether we're playing in a band together or he's recording me. But he's the one who really, really taught me how to play bass properly. And that's when I really fell in love with the instrument and identified with myself more as a bass player than a guitar player.
When I joined the band, I was actually not a bass player either. I was mostly comfortable playing the drums and the guitar. But in the case of me joining the band, I think the guys felt like I'd be able to transition into that instrument naturally. And so when we asked Jarvis, we felt like something similar was going to happen with him. It really felt like a natural thing when he did come into the fold and start playing with us. There really wasn't much of any acclimating to the position. You just kind of fit right in pretty much right away. I don't believe that I ever had to really show him much at all. Maybe I sat down with him a few times, perhaps, but I think his natural abilities really took over, and his musical sense shined through.
But taking the knowledge that I have from years of playing guitar and integrating that into bass playing, I think that's what's made me a more interesting bass player, especially in bands like Night Demon. So now that I was a full-fledged member of No Motiv and quit my day job, we were pretty much off and running. They had put out the album Daylight Breaking shortly after I joined the band.
He kind of came into the process after we had finished most of the record Daylight Breaking, but he, in some of the rehearsals, we had come up with some new material and we had to re-record a song the label really wanted to have on the record. And so he came into the sessions for that piece of it, which ended up being two songs on Daylight Breaking.
My only contribution to that record was a co-write on the song Laid to Rest.
Whatever life can bring, whatever life can bring, whatever life can bring, whatever life can
I also played bass on the track Brand New Day, but I had nothing to do with writing that. And that song had actually come out as a single prior to that record even coming out.
So at the time of us asking him to join the band, we had pretty much recorded Daylight Breaking. We had taken it to Vagrant, and at that point, they were very happy with what we wrote and recorded, produced by ourselves. There was just one song in particular, that being Brand New Day, which we had previously demoed when I was still the bass player and Pat was our drummer. And so the label had heard that version, and they were pretty fixated on wanting the energy and structure of that song to stay the same for the record. So much so that they asked us to go back into the studio and re-record it. So we went back into the studio with Jarvis as our bass player, and we reworked the song, re-recorded it. That was the album that I joined on. I'm credited as the bass player on that album, but those are the songs that I really play on and contributed to. But it was great. We toured the country a lot. The band never went to Europe, but we went all through Canada and the U.S. many times over.
So it feels really good to be playing a show in California finally after 5 weeks. So it goes out to you guys. Thanks.
And it was exciting. There was a lot of really great moments. I remember playing the Hollywood Palladium, and my grandparents, Mel and Barbara, my dad's mom and dad, when they were still alive, they were there. They came to the show, and they were sitting in the balcony, and I remember pointing at them. And it was a special moment because I'd grown up going to the Hollywood Palladium, seeing so many shows there, just metal shows. I remember my first Megadeth show there. But it's also the place that my grandparents met. They met at a dance a long time ago after the Second World War. And it was just cool to have them back there and in the place that they met and seeing their grandson, who they were so proud of, playing on the big stage. So that was definitely one of the highlights for me in playing live with No Motiv. But, the one thing the one thing about being in No Motiv is like they weren't playing metal, and it really helped me a lot with my songwriting because they were good songwriters. And you know, again, when you play with other people, you play with people from completely different musical backgrounds, there's so much that you can learn. And that's definitely what I learned with No Motiv, was how to write a proper song. So unfortunately, the band started to lose some steam. I think that there were some quarter life crises happening with some of us, where I think, you know, those guys have been doing it a lot longer than me in that band, and kind of felt like, okay, like it's not happening the way we want it to happen. You know, I'm going to get a real job or get an education or something like this. You know, I had no interest in that. I was just really wanting to play. So it was really, really, really heartbreaking for me. Especially because I finally got to start contributing in a big way to the band. And the last thing that we did was a 6-song EP called Winter Long. And, you know, I had brought in a lot of heavier elements and darker elements into that band. And they were really receptive of it. I mean, we were all... We were just, it was a great combination, the four guys. Once we started writing together, all of our influences would combine and make something really cool. And we were always really eclectic. We never really kind of stuck to one sound, which may have hurt us. But when I listen back to this stuff now, I think it's really ahead of its time. That EP didn't come out, I think, until 2010, but we wrote and recorded a version of that in the early 2000s. And, again, I'm just glad I could contribute in some way and be a part of something complete that band did, because they were very influential to all of us who grew up in the Oxnard-Ventura area.
Sadly, the process of doing the whole record that Jarvis played on kind of all happened sort of post-mortem on the band as like an official entity. We have this sort of like nebulous kind of hiatus breakup kind of thing where even to this day we'll play spotty little shows and every once in a while we'll put material out. But, the official end of the band happened before we actually released the EP Winterlong. But a lot of the writing process had kind of already taken place when we were in a more active role as a band.
I was actually listening to that EP recently, and it brought quite a smile to my face, reminiscing about really the chemistry that we've had throughout the years. The band has definitely gone through so many progressions in style, but ultimately I feel like that EP is a very nice representation of that time and place in our lives. And I believe that we were really clicking on all cylinders at that point in our collective songwriting. And I'm just really proud of how that album came out.
That EP was like the real kind of artistic collaboration that happened between the four of us. And we were all really happy with the songs. I think it was kind of the songs that, at least only speaking for myself, that was kind of the sound that we always were kind of hoping to land on. And that's the end of that.
It's an honor to say that I was a solid part of that legacy.
So that's it for this episode. These guys have such a history in music and playing in bands. I'm really digging these episodes, and I hope you guys are enjoying them as much as I'm enjoying putting them together. In the bonus section on nightdemon.net, we have full tracks by No Motiv and From Satellite. There's videos from each of the bands. You can always check out the whole Roots of the Demon section to see some pretty cool photo galleries and demos from these older bands. Next week, we continue on with the prehistory of the three members leading up to the formation of Night Demon. So until next time, this is Nesbitt, signing off.
Thanks for listening to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. Head over to nightdemon.net, click on the subscriber tab, and sign up to access exclusive weekly bonus content. If you would like to donate to support the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast, you can do so through PayPal at paypal.me/nightdemonmetal. Additionally, if you have not already done so, please subscribe, like, rate, and review the show on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All hail, Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast listeners. This is Dusty Squires chiming in to tell you about my brand new signature sticks from the London Drumstick Company. I I've dreamt of having my very own drumsticks ever since I was a wee lad, and LDC made that a possibility for me. Founded in 2016 in London, England, the birthplace of heavy metal, the London Drumstick Company has trailblazed a path through the music industry and taken the drummer world by storm. When I met them for the first time, they knew their product was going to withstand the beatings of a Night Demon show. They took the time to work with me on getting everything just right. The balance and weight of my sticks are the same no matter what, and the durability is bar none the best I've ever had. I know my sticks will last through the set night after night. I'm truly honored to work with a company that caters to their players the way LDC does. Their innovation and attention to detail is what separates them from the rest of the stick makers out there. Their custom stick sleeves are unbelievable and really make the entire presentation complete. Wait until you see the design they came up with for me. It blew my mind and was a surprise to say the least. They have all kinds of amazing swag, including hoodies, t-shirts, drummer shorts, drum keys, stick bags, towels, face masks, practice pads, and much, much more. Even if you're not a drummer, you can be a part of Demon history and order my brand new signature sticks direct from their website. How cool is that? And to top it off, the London Drumstick Company are giving an exclusive offer to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast listeners. Go to londondrumsticks.co.uk and receive a 15% store-wide discount using promo code DEMONSTICKS. All capital letters, no spaces, Demon Sticks. DEMONSTICKS. I can't thank everyone there enough for the opportunity to be a part of their family and for them trusting me with their amazing products. See you metal maniacs on the road very soon. And yes, the wood chips will be flying.
Greetings, boils and ghouls. This is your comrade, the Crypt Keeper here, reporting dead from the sanctuary of the strange. Tonight's macabre myth is a fright-filled feature, one overflowing with monsters, madness, and magic.
Visit our website at monstersmadnessandmagic.com to stay up to date on all the dark dealings within the sanctuary of the strange. Enjoy the show.
Hey Metalheads, I'm Mark and I host the Metal Forge. Let me tell you about the show. The Metal Forge features the best underground metal from all over the world. We spend every week with a different artist with interviews, in-depth conversations, and most of all, the music. We also feature audience interactivity where you can submit your questions to the upcoming guests. New episodes are out every Friday at noon Eastern Time at metalforgeradio.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking Podcast, a non-genre based, all-ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
Okay, metalheads, you've been complaining that there has not been a channel that plays all of the heavy metal videos from past, present, and future for years and years at this point. Well, that time is over. Heavy Metal Television is back. HeavyMetalTelevision.net is the website. Go there. You can see videos playing 24/7, 365, all the time. All the best from the old school, the new school, and everything in between. Check it out, HeavyMetalTelevision.net. It is where the metal is.